Yeah.
And now, our feature presentation.
But he did wear a straw hat and overalls as he plowed behind the mule under the hot sun. After 2 years of courtship, they were married, the 2nd day of May, 1917. Sister Clara's father was furious because of their elopement. They lived in a rented room. Their son Emmanuel was born February 3rd, 1921, in Sister Muhammad's parents' home. As the messenger had left going to Macon, Georgia, seeking better employment and higher wages to support his family. The messenger sent for his wife and their 1.5-month-old son Emmanuel to join him in Macon, Georgia, where he worked for the Cherokee Brick and Tile Company as a section hand and for the Southern Railroad and other jobs. In all of his jobs, his co-workers themselves chose him to be their spokesman, or his employers chose him to supervise others. Blacks were poor and suffering, with no jobs or jobs with very little pay. The beatings, torturing, and lynching of blacks was a frequent and seemingly legal affair. Segregation was a way of life for blacks that was accepted by them. Some blacks tried to escape by changing their color by bleaching creams, using lye, chemicals, and hot combs to straighten their hair, or by even passing. Our leader, Elijah Muhammad, moved to Detroit. There he worked at the American Can Factory and Chevrolet and other places, almost always being chosen by his fellow workers or employers as a leader of men to be foreman or supervisor. He was always kind, considerate, and concerned for his fellow brothers. Blacks were still suffering all over America. The Poole family, as our leader did not yet have the knowledge of himself or his God, and was yet going in the slave master's name. They were living at 8474 Manhattan Street in Hamtramck, in an area surrounded by Detroit, Michigan, with an outside toilet. In Detroit, one day in the latter part of 1931, our leader met with Master W.D. Farad, a savior who was teaching among blacks at 3208 West Hastings. Our leader immediately recognized the power of the message and the man teaching it. Our leader right away accepted the truth of the message and the giver of the message, seeking more insight, more wisdom, more knowledge, and more understanding. Our leader's family was poor and suffering. The children, Emmanuel, now 10, Ethel and Nathaniel and Lottie, had little or no clothing, mostly wearing clothes given to Sister Muhammad by the people she worked for. Emmanuel, remembering, said, they did not know the original color of the clothes as they had so many patches. Their shoes were reinforced with cardboard, and their father could not afford shoe repair or even purchases. No toys for the children, only an old tricycle, which their grandfather found and gave to Emmanuel. Ethel had an old rag doll, and Emmanuel would wear his mother's shoes to school, only to take them off at the railroad crossing to hide them before continuing on to school barefooted. Meat was on the table about twice a month. Elijah was too poor to even buy the poisoned meat, the pig or pork. Their meat purchases were chicken feet, clipping the toenails before cooking, sometimes buying and killing chickens, saving the feathers to make pillows and mattresses. Sour, spoiled bean soup was sprinkled with vinegar to kill the taste and odor for eating, but never thrown away. Emmanuel would pick thrown-away vegetable leaves to feed the family, and picking coals along the railroad tracks to burn in the stove for cooking and heating. This was the condition then, and yet today, of the black man in America, to which our leader and teacher sought relief, and now had a solution. Immediately upon accepting the message of our Savior W.D. Farad, the condition of our leader and teacher, who was now called Elijah Kareem, began to be improved. He moved into a home at 3050 Yeaman Street in Detroit, which was owned by Mr. and Mrs. Butler, where Mr. W.D. Farad paid the first month's rent. Later, he moved to 283 East Hancock Street, in a two-family home where his brother Kalat and family lived on the first floor. The Temple of Islam was located at Shane and Chestnut Street, now a vacant lot, then 3408 West Hastings, and later at Adams and St. Antone. In 1931, Sister Muhammad wrote and told her mother that they had met a savior. But Sister Muhammad's mother did not want to believe her. But Sister Muhammad was very staunch in her belief. Always interested to reach the then 17 million of our black people in the wilderness of North America, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad started up a weekly newspaper called The Final Call to Islam, to give the message of his mission a larger audience than he had at the temple meetings. On September 5th, 1934, Mr. Muhammad and his family took up residence in Chicago, Illinois, at 5830 South Wabash Avenue. The house is still standing. Later, they moved to 3735 South Giles, which is still standing. In the late 30s, they moved to 5308 South Wabash. The structure is still standing. In the meantime, as the messenger was chased by enemies to be killed, his family and followers held fast to the handle of Islam. The men, known as the Fruit of Islam, worked. Their wives and daughters stayed home and cooked and sewed, taking care of their homes, husband, and babies. Sister Muhammad, the wife of the messenger, carried out instructions of her husband, assigning work duties to her children, requiring that they complete their work, keeping a close discipline, loving family as they suffered ridicule for attending the Muslim school classes in homes, and for even being clean and self-respecting, and wearing long dresses, and covering their heads. Here are some of the first begotten of the dead of the lost found nation of Islam.
Brother Muhammad, tell us your first impressions of the messenger when you first met him.
When I first met the messenger, well, I knew that he was an unusual person, and his teaching of Islam to us. In the year of 1934, I accepted Islam, and he gave me duties to perform, such as reformer, secretary, and that kind of work, and I had an insight of what was really being done, and I thought that he was a wonderful teacher.
Where were the teachings being held at that time?
The teaching at my first time of hearing it was at 3335 South State Street, the old Oddfellows Hall.
All right. How was the struggle during that time, before and after the messenger came?
At that particular time, times were very hard, and people were without food and clothing, and we had a pretty tough struggle at the onset of the teaching of Islam in 1934, and we had our means of getting something to eat and food was by having push carts, as we call them, together, junk to carry to the junkyards and things of that sort. And we, as I said, we had a pretty tough struggle, but we stuck it out.
My name is Sister Viola Kareem. I heard of the messenger in 1932. My husband and father was the first to visit the temple, the Oddfellows Hall at 33rd and State Street. They copied the 10 questions off the board, which is the student enrollment. The next meeting, I recited it and was given a letter to write in for my holy name. The first meeting was held at 33 at the 33rd and State Street, the Oddfellows Hall. And they met Wednesday night, Friday night, and Sundays. Wednesday night at 8 p.m., 8 to 10, Sundays from 2 to 4.
Brother Leslie, when did you first hear the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad?
1934.
1934. How were times for you doing that?
Time was rough then.
Were you working?
No, sir, not no regular. It's work. It's whatever I get work to do.
Okay. Where did you first hear of the teachings?
3335 State Street.
On State Street. What type of, how did you first hear of it?
Well, I was living at 3922 State Street, and there was a fellow I knew come to my home that morning. I was getting ready to go to the Grand Theater to the moving picture show. He said, "Why don't you go to 3335 State and hear the teaching?" I hear what? Who is it? What you talking about? He says, "It's for going here." He said, "I never heard a man talk like that."
I said, all right. So I went on, heard it.
What was your first impression of the messenger?
Well, he told me what I wanted to know.
And what was that?
Well, how come you're in this shape and all like that.
These are the Muslim Sisters of Chicago wearing the first uniforms designed by our leader and teacher for the Muslim Girl Training and General Civilization class known as the MGT and GCC. They are some of the messenger's first followers who experienced the difficulties of the 30s, the hard times of the 40s, and who are yet with him today.